not as clean as I'd like it to be. There we go. Sorry for that. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's class on Mishna Berurah. We are continuing in Siman 55, which is Nun Hey 55. Last time we were talking about the overall requirements for when you need a minyan to say Kaddish and other parts of the prayer service. Today we're going to focus on people who can count for the minyan. So we're going to review the question of who can. We're going to review the question of who can count for a minyan. We kind of started that, but we'll go over it again quickly. Okay, so we said you need at least 10 adult males. Okay, so that was something that we had said originally, that you needed to have 10 adult males. So now we're going to come to one unique opinion over here, which is in Daled, and then in Daled and Hey, which is, so we said that last time that you can recite things known as Davar Shebekadusha, meaning those things that require a minyan, like Baruch Hu, Kaddish, Kriyas Torah, as long as you are including a child greater than 6 years old, and he knows to whom he prays. Okay. However, this opinion does not appear viable by the greatest of the sizers, and so too, a servant and a woman cannot be included in Davar Shebekadusha for number 10. So you have 9 adult males. This is number 10. And the Ramah adds, even if he's holding a chumash, meaning one of the books of the Torah, in his hand, you may not include him to the 10. However, some rely on this in a case of great necessity. So what does that mean? A case of great necessity. We love great necessity. So the Mishna Berurah explains the following. He says that some people, this thing of the chumash is, the Mishna Berurah doesn't really do it a lot of justice. He says that having a chumash doesn't count. What does that mean to have a chumash? Okay. So he says the thing is that there's opinions who basically say that there are people who allow you to count somebody else for a 10th opinion. So one opinion allows you to count even a child, not even one that knows to whom he prays. One could even use an infant. Okay, and the point is that the 3 groups of 3 and having 10 are equivalent. The point is that 3 is for a case of zimun. Okay, and the other opinion is that you can use just a 10th body to finish up to the full thing. Okay, and so the reason why he was even more was slightly lenient was because maybe it's more lenient, or maybe more possible if the child at least knows to whom he's praying. Okay, so maybe some people will allow it with a zimun, meaning right before you bench. Okay, and that's where the Machaber is also lenient in that case as well. But we don't allow that, or don't permit that, and don't recognize it. So the idea of including other people is hotly debated back and forth in the early responsa, but no one recognizes it as something viable. Okay, the chumash, by the way, is written on parchment. Okay, just like a seif Torah. So that's what he was referring to. So this is not in the Mishna Berurah. It's just the commentary I'm adding to you. But contemporaries of the Ramah who said that people allowed it to be lenient at times of great need, we don't see anybody who really follows that custom. So the Mishna Berurah says the following about being lenient on that, and he says that the people who are lenient just to have a baby there at all. Okay, so the students of the Ramah say, I've never seen anybody do that. Okay, and some people will allow you to carry the chumash in their hand, but that's only for Baruch Hu and Kaddish. Okay, but for the middle of Shachar service, but not after services. Okay, and some people even say you shouldn't use that at all until they're at least 13 years old. Other people who don't count for a minyan, onain, a person who is waiting to bury his deceased immediate family member, is not counted. Okay. So meaning that as long as he's waiting to basically have somebody buried, they don't count for a minyan either. And let's see who else. However, a person in mourning is certainly counted for a minyan. So when you go to their house for the shiv minyan, you can count them. Let's go back for a second to talk about this custom of including a child for the minyan. So some people say that the custom doesn't count. So if someone asked, so the Eliyahu Rabbah, another commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, says that maybe it's because we don't carry a chumash that's written on parchment anymore. Maybe that was the deal. Okay, so, but maybe if you had a full Sefer Torah there and the child was holding it, that would count. So he says that there are some people who allowed you to go ahead and rely on having the Sefer Torah there on a time of great need. And he quotes other Gedolim, such as Rabbi Ol Sirkes, who is the author of the Bayis Chadash, along with Rav Moshe Isserles as the Ramah himself. So they're not saying this was normal, but we're saying that if you were in a case where people were away for that time period and so on and so forth, so the custom it was customary to be lenient for that and not to require you to skip a minyan that day. Okay, and so they say that the difference is, okay, the difference is that since the custom was not to do this on a regular basis, you can still rely on it. You're not supposed to do it regularly. Okay, so just interesting statements over there. Okay, that basically the minhag is not to rely on this, but there were people who did rely on it. Okay. Next halach over here is halacha hey. If the person has not reached full puberty. Full puberty in Jewish law is to have at least 2 pubic hairs. Okay, even though he has reached 13 years and 1 day, like we said earlier, or even at that point, he has to have gone through most of his year-long progression to make sure that he's not considered to be a eunuch or some other, they call it a child that cannot have children, not a eunuch, sorry, I don't use translate the wrong word. It's used interchangeably in Hebrew. That child could be this child could eventually be able to have other children of their own, and so therefore they need to be able to demonstrate that. So they don't have one of those genetic conditions that prevents them from doing this. However, the Ramah adds that we don't inspect somebody to see if they have the physical signs of this. We just wait for them to come to that age. We accept that, okay? And so therefore, we can rely on that. We can rely on that without having to do any further inspection, okay? Okay, so a person is that person who goes through most of their life and never actually starts to grow any hair on their body. There are conditions like that which are not related to this. However, this was the symbol that a person had become an adult. Okay. So if a person shows up where they seem to say that they are not capable of being childbearing, this actually has implications in the realm of yibum. And so, therefore, if they don't have any hair growing on their body, even especially on their beard, which is mentioned in the laws of yibum, then they shouldn't be counting for a minyan either. even if they've gone up until age 35 and haven't done that. However, we don't do that. We say that as long as they get to be old enough, that's fine. However, it sounds like he's referring to a 13-year-old. However, the Mishna Berurah points out he's talking about a 20-year-old. Okay? And that would be 30 days into his 20th year. And that's what most people say when it comes to the laws of Yibum as well. If the doesn't have any hairs growing, especially not in his beard and so on like that. So, that's something to be concerned about. However, before that time, you still consider that person to be immature and not ready to be counted for a minyan if they are that way. However, we can go ahead and count children without having to worry about the minyan. So that's what our custom is. So it sounds like from Mr. Berurah first that we shouldn't be like, are you above mitzvah? That shouldn't count. But we're saying that since it's something that's only rabbinic, that's different than in the case of Yibum, where you need to make sure that they are a viable adult. Okay? Okay, 6. Okay. That's the end of those rules regarding who's counting for a minyan. So now, let's say you go ahead and start davening by yourself, and then 9 other people show up in the room with you. Okay? So if there's for whatever reason that they can't answer to you, or that person's in the room and they were sleeping, they do count towards the 10, the Yasara. Okay? So this person would also count, even if when they started praying ahead of the congregation that gathers afterwards, the other 9, as long as most people remain davening. So that's at least 6 people davening. So if you walk into the room and there's 3 people who started on their own, and you go ahead and bring 7 others, that's okay. Okay? And then you go ahead and do a full repetition of the other Shemona Esrei for that case. But some people say that's only acceptable if it's 1 person, not for 2 and not for 3. Okay? And some people are even strict to not include a sleeping person unless there's nobody else. Okay? Some people don't like using and relying on a sleeping person. Now, even though the Shulchan Aruch brings that down, that according to the Shulchan Aruch, you could count a sleeping person for all types of stuff. You count them for reading from the Torah. You can include them for doing the priestly blessing. However, by reading the Megillah, let's say on Purim night, you can't do that. Why? Because there's a requirement of Pirsumei Nisa that night. The person who is passed out can't be able to witness the glory of the miracle. Therefore, you can't count a sleeping person, according to those opinions. Okay, so as long as there are 10 adults in the room, we learn from this halacha that God's presence is found there, and that's how Hashem is sanctified amongst the Jewish people. That's why we weren't counting a katan before, and we weren't counting other people who weren't included in it as well, because these people are able to achieve proper sanctification in their midst. Okay, and so some people also say that, just like we had previously said as well, that a person who's asleep should be considered like someone who is a shoteh, someone who is not in their right mind, shouldn't be counted. However, if you were to wake them, that might be feasible, but there are some issues. So what are the issues by rousing a person who is sleeping? So problem is that even though you could rely on a person who's sleeping, that since there are people who are lenient on it, maybe you could rely on this in a case of great need, like you're not finding a minyan otherwise. So all you want to do is recite the Kaddish for Shacharis, and then you want to recite the Kedusha and Shemona Esrei. That would be okay to allow you to have somebody who's sleeping and or you rouse them slightly. So the point is that these things are considered a little bit less strict. Okay, the requirement of a person being awake. So it's better to rouse them slightly, um, as opposed to letting them sleep all the way through. Okay, so that is what we should do with those people. Now let's see. Though we just said that if people already started davening, you can include them in the davening. So what's a nice thing to do is to go ahead and wait for them to finish the davening in order that they can recite the Baruch Hu and the Kaddish, so that he too should benefit from reciting those prayers along with them. Okay, even if he's not part of the final 10 that come into the room. Okay, and so too with a sleeping person, Mishna Berurah adds, you should wake him and say, "Come say Kaddish, come say Baruch Hu." And if he doesn't want to, you don't have to wait for him. Okay. But people who say that it doesn't count, you should rouse him and kind of like urge him to get up. Okay, more people who can't count for a minyan. So we people who don't count for a minyan are a deaf person who can speak but cannot hear, or he can hear but cannot speak. Okay, so there's a deaf person who can. I'm sorry, there is a deaf person who can speak but cannot hear, and there's a deaf person who can hear but cannot speak. And these people are considered perfectly fine to count for a minyan. But if they can neither hear nor speak, they are considered the same as any person who is a shota, a crazy person, and a child. Okay. So some later rabbis are strict about this because they can't answer amen to the brachos, they can't hear them. But people disagree with that opinion, and they side with the Shulchan Aruch that you can go ahead and say and say Dvarim Shabbat Kedusha with a person who is deaf. Okay, and so as long as you can kind of signal to them that you're coming up to the ends of the brachos and they're paying attention, that's fine. Okay. Okay, and so that's one way to resolve that problem. Next halacha, we're in test now, number 9. Okay, so a person is considered a child until they grow the 2 hairs that we talked about previously. Okay, and so they have to be at least 13 in a day. And if it falls out during a leap year, you have to get 13 months into it. Okay. So even though we said before that you need to have these different symbols to make sure that you're not considered a barren person to count for a minyan. But sometimes you can't control how your body responds. These hormonal changes that aren't necessarily tied down to that. So the thing is that we should always require, in the case of rabbinic rules, that you can be lenient. Okay, and therefore it has to be 13 in one day. But the reason why we don't worry about it is because maybe they began to go through puberty and the initial signs of puberty have waned off, have waxed, and then they'll come back. But we can't do that for anything other than things that are rabbinic. So in the Torah law cases like Yibum and such, it's different. Okay. So how do you know if he's 13 or not? You ask his father, and his father is believed to tell you when he was born, and nobody else. So why? Because there's a din of what's known as yakir. The father will say who's the mother, who's the firstborn of the mother, and how old the children are. And so therefore the father is believed to establish the age of the son. If the father dies before he becomes bar mitzvah, and you don't know when he's going to turn 13, then you have to wait for them to produce the signs of their on their person that they've gone through puberty, and you can't believe that they are 13 without that. Okay, at least by Torah laws. Now, do you need one full day? Because we say it all the time, 13 years in one day. So Mishna Berurah says it's not that you need a full day. As long as you have begun to go into the 14th year, even 1 hour, and even 1 moment, that suffices. Okay? And so even if the person was born at the very end of the day of Rosh Chodesh, since it's still the daytime, therefore that's going to be his birthday in 13 years from now. Okay? So you're gonna, when you get back to that same Rosh Chodesh again, that's going to be his birthday as soon as you get into it. Now, if you were past sunset, then you have to wait into another day. Okay, but maybe you could be lenient on a rabbinic custom. And more laws about a child over here. Okay, fun facts about people when people are born. If a child was born on the 29th of Adar Rishon, all right, talk about the leap years now. So you have a leap year that's coming up. We have 2 months of Adar in this year. And this child was born on 29 of Adar, which is the end of that month. Okay? And another child was born on Adar Sheni, on the 1st of Adar Sheni. Okay, so they were born after them. But the 13 years later is not a leap year. The child that was born on the 29th of Adar has to wait to the 29th of that month in the non-leap year. And the one who was born on the first day of Adar, okay, he becomes 13 at the beginning of that month. So technically, even if he's born in the second month, he's going to become bar mitzvah for the same kid who's born earlier than him. And so the Ramah adds, so a child that was born in Adar becomes a bar mitzvah this is the opposite case. If he's born in the regular Adar month during a non-leap year, he now has a leap year in the 13th year. He only becomes a bar mitzvah in Adar Sheni. Okay? So just a cute little, because the Adar Sheni is considered the main, the whole point over here is that Adar Sheni is considered the main month. Okay? So the reason why is because, again, Adar Rishon is considered an extra month, and the main month is really Adar Sheni. Okay, because it's 30 days before. Because you want to make sure that Purim falls out 30 days before Pesach. Let's see. So this is the same thing with, like, in some years where a person is born on a 31st day, and the next, that's not there. The next year is between months of Mar Cheshvan and Kislev. So in that case, the Rosh Chodesh of that year, you'll be a day earlier as well. So these are other similar cases to that. Okay. Okay. So you're always considered in the case of being born on a year that switches between being an extra day and not an extra day, the first of the next month is considered your actual birthday. Oh, let's see. I think that's a good place to stop, because we have the next section over here is a brand new topic. We're talking about people who sin and how they count towards the minyan. So it's going to be interesting, because then we'll talk about people who don't keep the mitzvahs properly. I think we'll hold it here for today, and so just a brief review, and then we will end the day. So we learned today about people who can be counted for a minyan. So we learned that you cannot count a non-adult male, so neither a child, a woman, or a servant can be counted for a minyan. A child in a case of great need while holding a chumash might be able to be counted for a minyan, but that people don't rely on that. Maybe even require a seif Torah, as we saw. That's not from the Mishna Berurah, it's from sources outside of that. However, no one seems to rely on this very frequently at all. But there were cases where some people in extreme circumstances did. But it seems like that's not a long-term solution to have a minyan. To have a child holding a sefer Torah, having a child hold a chumash, or even having a baby in a car seat count towards your minyan. Then we also learned that a person who is deaf and can still talk, or is or can't or is they're considered deaf but they can hear and cannot talk, or considered a mute. Since they could follow along in some capacity, they can count towards the minyan. We also learned a little bit about what's considered appropriate to consider a child as an adult, and we learned that it's not such a simple thing. You need to know when their birthday is, that only their fathers within their birthday, that the birthday follows certain things. For example, if it's on a Rosh Chodesh of a year that has 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, their birthday is always going to be on the first day of of the next month of the actual Rosh Chodesh, which is day 1 of the next month. Like, for example, day 1 of Kislev. We also saw that you count Adar Sheni as the integral month, and so therefore, if a person has a birthday, or they were born, in Adar Rishon, that's not really considered an actual month. Therefore, we don't count towards it. And so we'll pick up next week with different categories of people who violate different things and whether they can count it for a minyan or not. Have a wonderful day.